I've listened to the choir sing that beautiful piece, and I turned to Mark and I said, "Why would you preach?" I mean, what a wonderful leadership group in worship you have, leading you in worship. You are so blessed, and if you've been to other churches, maybe you know how blessed you are. So I will not be preaching anymore from now on. Just be the choir. This story this morning is in Mark's Gospel. I'd like for you to get your pew Bibles out. Do you see those in front of you? And turn to Mark. It's on page 36. I want you to look at that. And when we get to the part where Jesus speaks, I'd like for all of you to speak his part. Okay? So we'll do this sort of in a dramatic way. It is about Jesus healing a man, but I want you to pay attention with me to what the humans are doing in this story. I think sometimes we read the Bible too fast. We read a story, we say, oh, look, Jesus has the power to heal people. Well, when you think about it, that's not that big a deal. I mean, in one sense, God hung Jupiter out there in the middle of nowhere, hanging with nothing, holding it up. So healing somebody is probably, not that impressive on the one hand. On the other hand, it's very impressive. But the Bible's also showing you human activity around divine activity. It's showing you us. We're in this story. So pay attention to that as we listen to this account of some folks who actually tore the roof off of Jesus' house. That's crazy, isn't it? So you're reading Jesus' part. When he returned to Capernaum after some days, it was reported that he was at home, and so many gathered around that there was no longer room for them, not even in front of the door, and he was speaking the word to them. And then some people came, bringing to him a paralyzed man, carried by 4 of them. And when they could not bring him to Jesus because of the crowd, they removed the roof above him, and after having dug through it, they let down the mat on which the paralytic lay. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, "Son, your sins are forgiven." Now some of the scribes were sitting there, questioning in their hearts, "Why does this fellow speak in this way? It's blasphemy. Who can forgive sins but God alone?" And at once Jesus perceived in his spirit that they were discussing these questions among themselves, and he said to them, "Why do you raise such questions in your hearts? Which is easier to say to the paralytic, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Stand up and take your mat and walk'? He said to the paralytic, "I say to you, stand up, take your mat, and go to your home." And he stood up and immediately took the mat and went out before all of them, so that they were all amazed and glorified God, saying, "We have never seen anything like this." The word of the Lord. Now, we aren't given these 4 people's names. The Bible doesn't apparently care about their names because we don't get it. We don't even know if they're men or women. It just says 4 people, so that's great because women can live into this text, men can live into the text. And there were more than these 4 who were bringing this man to Jesus. If you paid attention to the story, there were people who came, and then it said carried by 4 of them. So there's a crowd of people who were bringing this paralytic person to Christ. And we don't know why they did this. But somehow Jesus had impacted their lives so that they knew if they could get this man, and we're going to call him Henry through the sermon, they could get their friend Henry to Jesus, something would happen. Something would change. If we can just get this man who is pure dead weight, whose life is limited and small and painful, if we can pick him up and take him to Jesus, something will happen. God healed this man, but these 4 people got him there. I think that's the role of the church. Somebody had to come up with a plan. I mean, especially if they were Presbyterians. They had to talk about this for about 2 years. It's a good thing Henry lived through it. They had to care enough about him. They had to love him to pick him up and carry him through Capernaum. And they had to be intentional in what they were doing, and it probably caused some inconvenience to them. It wasn't on their calendar. If you're like me, my calendar's full, and interruptions just aren't welcomed sometimes because I'm on track. I got to get all this stuff done. I bet Henry broke in on their calendars. They wanted to physically take him and put him in an environment that would change his life. Now, using some biblical imagination, so that means I'm making this up. I think one of them was a Methodist, one of them was a Southern Baptist, one of them was an Episcopalian, and one of them was a Presbyterian. Now, they had some options. The Methodists, when they got to the house and it was full and they couldn't get their friend in there, could have said, let's put him down outside here, tag a note on him that says, Dear Jesus, please heal Henry when the Bible study's over. We couldn't wait around. Thank you. The 4. And that would be because Methodists don't stay long enough to really get anything done. That's a joke. I know I'm going to have to teach y'all to laugh in church some. I'm feeling it. The Southern Baptists could have said, if we just had enough water, we could baptize this guy and solve all his problems. Make sure he tithes 10% of his income, goes to Sunday school, that's big, and go to church, and no more dancing. The Episcopalian could have said, let's pull out the prayer book and find a prayer. What to pray when you can't get somebody to see Jesus. It's on page 287. But you know what the Presbyterian did? You know, don't you? They formed a committee to study paralysis. They're still meeting. None of those 4 did any of that. What they did do was tore the roof off. Now, I think that's crazy. If you've been to Capernaum, and I understand many of you have been to the Holy Land, and Bill Barron's taken a lot of folks, you've been to Capernaum and you've seen the little foundation this house was sitting on. So this isn't a big home. Jesus and supposedly Peter shared this house right across the little street from the synagogue. Capernaum wasn't that big a village in those days. But this little teeny house had it had to have a mud thatch roof on it, the way the Bible talks about it. They dug through the roof. Now, if you're in a small room with Jesus and he's teaching a Bible study and people start digging through the roof, you're going to see the first sprinkle of dust and think, wonder what that is. And then it's going to get heavier and heavier, and you're going to see branches coming off the roof, and you're going to see human hands coming down into the roof of Jesus' house. And there's going to be mud and debris on everybody's head and hair. It's messy. And most of them probably ran out the door, and Jesus was left in there to see, what's going to happen here? And they lowered a man down on a pallet into this little house and plunked him down in front of Jesus. As if to say, we're not going home until this man is healed. God, I wish the church could find that faith again. We ain't going home until something happens. These people were amazing. Sometimes you have to tear a roof off. You know what I'm talking about. If it's your son or your daughter who's in trouble, you'll tear a roof off. to get that child through the obstacles to where they need to be. Now is the time for something to happen. I'm not waiting. It's time for this paralysis to end. And sometimes God uses us, feeble as we are, to be a part of that healing process. That's the privilege of being the church. Now, there's a lot of paralysis in the world, right? People are paralyzed physically, and they're literally paralyzed, and they're paralyzed spiritually. People are paralyzed this morning, and maybe some of you know what I'm talking about, with addictions. They are crippling. And as much as you want to walk away from them, they just keep walking with you. And it's a hard nut to crack, regardless of what you're addicted to. Maybe somebody in your family's dealing with an addiction. It's a paralysis. Paralyzed, like Henry. Dead weight. Not living the life God created them to live. Illness is crippling. The older we get, the more illnesses we have, and our life gets a little smaller, doesn't it? And it can feel like you're paralyzed compared to what you were when you were young and vibrant. Your life becomes limited. Unresolved anger is paralyzing. An anger you just aren't willing to let go of because you feel justified in having it. But it's killing you. Like acid on metal, it's killing you. You're paralyzed. With a lack of forgiveness, with a thirst for power, in a painful marriage, in homelessness, in depression, in loneliness, in racism, in classism, in sexism, in unemployment, or you're paralyzed in a job you hate and you get up every day and go to it and you hate it every day. You're paralyzed. Materialism will paralyze you. I got to have more stuff that says I'm really important and I'm somebody. And no matter how much stuff you have, you're still you. You're paralyzed. And in our recent culture, there's a growing sense of nihilism. It comes from the Latin word nil, which means nothing. So it is the rejection of all religious and moral principles. Nihilism. There is no absolute truth. People are paralyzed. So what's the role of Christianity and the church in all of this paralysis we see on the news 24/7? And the paralysis, by the way, that's in our own homes and in our own families and friends. It's not always out there. So is the role of the church to be a moral policeman? We're supposed to have all the rules and the regulations, and if we just gave those to the world and they followed our rules, they could somehow get right with God? I don't think a book of rules would have helped Henry much, do you? Lying there paralyzed, and here, Henry, here's a book of rules. Follow these. These are all the right answers on all the right issues. And if you just line up with us, you'll be healed. I don't believe that's true. And I don't think you do either. Or maybe the church is to be a chaplain, to administer comfort to the hurts and the pains of the world, to hold the hands of the world while it dies. But I don't think Henry's friends were about making him more comfortable on that pallet. I think they wanted him to stand up and walk and leave that pallet. And mere charity wouldn't have helped this man either, as if to say, here, Henry, here's some food and a warmer coat. We hope you have a good holiday, and we'll see you again next year. That's charity. And when you leave that frozen turkey and all of those presents for those poor people, and you go home, they're still poor. And they're still paralyzed. And in a way, so are you. What is the Christian response to paralysis? These 4 people took Henry to Jesus. They didn't take him to church. Let me take you to Sequoia Hills Presbyterian Church. Well, this is a nice enough church, I suppose. I've only been here 2 weeks, so I'm sure I'll find some dirt before it's over with. But is it going to change anybody's life if I bring them to an organization or to a building? No. They took Henry to Jesus because they knew it was him who would heal the brokenness of the world. And don't let me oversimplify this, because not everybody can come to church and go to Jesus and get their illnesses healed. I wish that were the case, and I don't know why it's not the case. But it's complicated. Some people get healed, other people don't. There's a variety of healing. Sometimes we pray for somebody to be healed, they die, and we say, well, maybe that was the healing. We're always being God's lawyer. We're trying to figure out, we don't want our client to look bad. So we're constantly trying to figure out what all this means when we live looking in a mirror dimly. We humans don't see things clearly. So it's not as easy as some people may want it to sound, that if you just come to Jesus, everything will be healed. Yes and no. But if human brokenness, now listen, if human brokenness, some call that sin, if human brokenness is healed in the person and work of Jesus Christ, then the role of the church is to pick people up and take them to Him and Him alone. Many churches of all denominations, by the way, are declining. You know this is true. They're declining in membership. They're declining in financial support. They're wondering where the young people are. Even here, you're wondering, where are some of the people who used to be here? And why aren't people more active and involved? And what's going on? And why aren't they here? This is going on nationwide. And you'll see pockets of growth and activity, but for the most part, overall, the American church is in decline. 86% of all churches in the PCUSA are 200 members or less. Most of those 86% are 100 members or less. And those people who belong to that church, and usually 100 members, church would have about 20 folks coming to church on Sunday morning. Those 20 people gathered this morning as I speak are all aging. Of course, we're all aging, but you know what I mean. They're really aging. We lose 50% of our clergy in their first call in the first 5 years. We lose 50% of Presbyterian clergy in their first call within the first 5 years. Why? I don't know why, but I know somebody needs to be tearing off a roof to figure out why. And why are we in decline? I read this and study this. I mean, this is a part of who I am. I want to know what's going on that the church of all institutions in this culture is in decline. What happened? Is it that we became confused about who we are and what we do? Have we become, in some sense, a religious cruise ship where there's all these activities that are handed to you on a sheet of paper? You can come for this, you can come for that, you can do this, you can do that, sign up for this, sign up for that. Today there'll be volleyball on deck number 2, there'll be, and you've got a staff that runs the ship, for the purpose of the passengers who are receiving the benefits of the services. A religious cruise ship. If it is a religious cruise ship, where is it going? And what's the point of the cruise? These four people knew exactly what the point of the cruise was. They were taking Henry to Jesus, that his life might be transformed and changed. Not more comfortable, changed. Not more intellectual, changed. Not about doctrine, which side of this issue are you on or the other, changed. Not liberal, moderate, or conservative, changed. Not by you, by the way, by Christ. And they were determined, I'll tear the roof of Jesus off if I have to get this man where he needs to be. The Bible tells you that Jesus saw their faith. I find that interesting because the Bible doesn't say, and Jesus was concerned about his roof. Could have said that. And Jesus was concerned about his roof. How dare you tear down the property of someone that doesn't belong to you? You know, we Presbyterians say we do everything decently and in order. I'm of the opinion we may need to become more indecent and more out of order. Maybe we're too tied up, too sober, as Pentecost would say. I think they're drunk. Oh, we'd never be accused of that. The church in this modern culture needs to learn what our business we're in and get tenacious about that business. Jesus saw not the disruption of the roof, nor did it say he saw the paralysis. He's not looking at what's wrong in you. He's looking at your faith. Now in Hebrews, faith is defined this way. It is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Faith. So faith is not wishful thinking. I wish God would do something. If I just keep wishing long enough, maybe God will heal my brother, or heal my sister, or heal my mommy, or my dad, or heal my wife, or heal me, or heal our government, heal our country. We just keep wishing. That's like when somebody says, you tell them a problem you have, and they say, I'll be thinking about you. And I've always wondered, what good is that going to do me? Well, I'll be thinking about you. I'll go, well, okay, I'll be thinking about you too. We'll just think about each other. Faith is not intellectual assent, like knowing all the correct beliefs, and now I have faith because I know all the right stuff. No. Nor is it manipulating God. If I just have enough faith, maybe then God will do something. So I'll just conjure up some faith, and then God will give me that parking space. Or God will help us buy that second home, or get that new boat. Well, you've got a genie in a bottle is what you've got. You don't have the God of the universe. And that's not faith. Faith is knowing something before it's there. You're not hoping it's there. You're not wishing it's there. You're not even having to pray that it's there. You know it's there. You know it like I know that table's right there. Faith is knowing. And who gives you the gift of faith? God. These four people knew something. They knew something. They weren't hoping for something. They weren't wishing for something. I'll dare say they weren't even praying for anything. They knew if I get Henry to him, he is going to change his life. Man, what kind of business are we in as a church if we're not in that business? They didn't leave him outside the door. They didn't give him a book of rules. They didn't study paralysis. They tore off the house of Jesus. I just suggest this. I'm new, but I'm not new to the church. Maybe it's time for this church to tear off some roofs, some obstacles to our business, and get deep into the business we're in. This Martin Luther King weekend, we're reminded of a man who tore off some roofs, aren't we? He had his problems. We've all read the history. He wasn't perfect. Neither am I. But God used him to tear some roofs off of our racism and our inequalities. The only problem I see is I don't think they lowered us far enough down into the house for us to be completely healed. We've still got a problem. And the church knows where that problem can be healed. The world we live in today needs a church like that. A church that'll tear off a roof. A church that knows something. God help us in this place to be that church. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.